This week, rural fire departments and a special fundraiser. Are farmers getting into the field early, or would they rather get some rain? Frost seeding into your pasture. Toy tractors and mini bikes. The surest way to go back in time. This is the Rural Reflections Podcast. Hey, welcome to the Rural Reflections Podcast. We've got Dave Nelson in Carrington, North Dakota. We got myself, Grant Nelson, here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio. But Dave, one common denominator is we're both from Viking.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've been from Viking, but still my hometown.
It sure is. And by the way, good to hear from you. We kind of jumped into the Viking thing right away, but I haven't lived in Viking or near Viking since the mid-90s, and I think most people still assume I live around Viking, but I keep good tabs on them, that's for sure. And I just wanted to let everybody know that they've got a fundraiser coming up for Viking Fire and Rescue, and that's going to be a spaghetti dinner on Saturday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. That's Saturday the 20th. That's going to be a drive-through event at the Viking Diner. They've assimilated pretty well in these COVID times. So they're going to have a drive-through event, and that includes a free will donation to help keep the Viking Fire going strong. How about out in Carrington, Dave? Do you have a pretty good fire department out there? Lots of people on it and pretty good support?
We have a very good support, very modern fire with a lot of rural grass fire equipment and rescue, as far as car wrecks and stuff like that. And it's very well supported, but it's still hard to get firemen, and keep them.
That's the problem. I think everybody, all the rural fire departments, ambulances, we've even noticed it when I worked at the sheriff's office. Finding dispatchers was a real struggle to get somebody to work these jobs. And usually people, the ones who do, they're ready and they do a lot of work, but you're going to wear them down after a while. Now, here's the thing I noticed you said about grass fire rigs and grass fire response. We've had some drought going on here. I took a look at the drought maps before we got on the air today. Both Minnesota and North Dakota are pretty dry. How are things out there, Dave?
Yeah, we're very dry. And then we didn't get anything for makeup moisture really over the winter. Actually, it has totaled up to somewhere around 2 inches of total moisture, but it's also been warm and dry, and you wouldn't know it by looking at anything. So we're going to be needing rain for sure.
Yeah. We know around here, everybody's looking for a little bit of rain or something. I even talked to a fellow out in the western part of the state, and he said, well, we'd trade some of this getting into the field early for a little bit of moisture or even a lot of moisture, even if it delayed us for quite a while. I mean, there's always a premium, it seems, on getting into the field a little bit earlier, getting more heat units, that sort of thing. But there's a larger premium this year on getting some moisture, Dave.
Yeah, we'd like, at least some starter moisture. I mean, it can rain again in the summertime and you'll get by, but it would sure be nice to know that we have at least enough to get things started. We've been hauling combines out of Grand Island, and we specifically went down on Thursday and Friday for the last one. We were going to go on Sunday, but they're getting so much rain down there right now, rain and snow. So it's not too far away. I mean, the guys drove through a lot of slush and snow just about 60 miles south of here, and pretty much all the way through South Dakota on the way down.
Well, 35 miles south of Thief River Falls last week, Erskine had slush on the roads, and then it headed south from there all the way probably down to the cities. And then east and west, it followed a pretty good course, but a lot of out in the Arrowhead, they had a lot of slush out there. I always thought that it would have been so nice this year, I have frost seeded pasture for many years now. This year I didn't really have to. And for those who wonder what frost seeding is, that's just basically spreading seed on your pasture and letting a freeze thaw cycle work it into the ground. And then if it got a little bit of snow on top, I thought, what a year for it. If you got another 4 to 8 inches of just a quick snow in late March, early April, and then have that melt into the ground, boy, you'd have some great frost seeding conditions. And the thing that always makes me worry a little bit, Dave, is when I start hearing about weather forecasters and farmers talking about timely rain.
Well, that's what happens when you're short on, when you don't have any excess moisture. You have to have those rains in a very timely fashion in order to keep your crop alive. I don't know. I'm still predicting that April's going to get wet because of all the fog we had in January and so on, end of January. So I'm hoping we're going to get, you hate to be picky, but I want enough moisture, but I don't want a deluge either.
Yeah, that right in the middle area would be good. Well, I've got good news on that because I put away my snowblower yesterday. I put away my snowplow yesterday, and I'm going to take the ballast out of my pickup, out of the back of my pickup, so I'll be totally vulnerable to any kind of snow. That should bring it. If it doesn't, I don't know what I can do. One thing I wanted to talk to you real quick about, because we both have a love of toy tractors, I'm slowly increasing the size of my fleet. Now, I started off with a 706 narrow front. I'm going to stay with narrow fronts for a little while, but I got a 544 with a canopy, and Dave, I got a 1456 narrow front. Now, there couldn't have been too many 1456 narrow fronts.
I wouldn't think so. Probably never came with them, but they were added or something, even, because I've never seen one, but that doesn't mean they didn't exist.
I'll tell you what, even in 1/16 scale, they look like a bull. I mean, it's awesome to look up. I've got a little bit of light underneath the tractors, and when you see that 1456 in narrow front, and it's got a little bit bigger tires in the front, somebody added tires onto the front that are a little bit bigger on the backside, and also did a little detail painting. I mean, it just takes your breath away. Dave, let's take a break here from the Rural Reflections podcast. In the next portion of our podcast, we're going to talk about mini bikes. I mean, it's springtime. What a great time to get out and drive around. We'll talk about mini bikes. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back on the Rural Reflections podcast. Welcome back to the Rural Reflections podcast. You got Dave Nelson out in Carrington, North Dakota. Grant Nelson here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio. Dave, this is the time of the year when it's just so doggone nice outside that it's a shame not to get out and enjoy it. And I think a lot of people like to do that. Probably nowadays they get out on four-wheelers or side-by-sides or something. But there was a time when the best way to get out there was on a mini bike, probably back in the 70s, maybe the early 80s. And I think one thing that you and I both have in common, now we've got the Honda in common also, but that held Trail Bronc and Super Bronc, those were something special, Dave, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. I had hours and hours of enjoyment on I think mine was called the Super Bronc because it had the big wide tires on it.
Yes, it was.
And it also had the high handlebars. It made it look a little bit like a chopper, but not really. But yeah, it was fun. I spent hours and hours of mudding around and trying to climb hills, and actually it even went underwater a couple of times, and it died going underwater, but I took the spark plug out and cranked it over and left it sit for a while, and after about an hour it started up again and we went home. But yeah, that was fun times. They were, they'd go about 50 miles an hour if you waited long enough. And it was just a lot of good, clean fun.
Yeah, they put more of a premium on torque, I think, with those than they did on top end. So it took you a little while to get there. But I remember even the Super Bronc, I think that had a hitch on the back, or that was an option, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. Yeah, they had an optional little tow hitch on the back. I don't recall ever towing anything with mine, but if you had a little trailer or something that you wanted to take with you, if you were, a real backwoodser or something, you could pull your little trailer with your tent and supplies on there and go live out in the woods for a few days.
Now, we had a Trail Bronc. I think you brought that Trail Bronc home for us, didn't you?
Yeah.
Well, that one was blue, and that had the smaller tires, but I think they both had Briggs & Stratton engines. The Trail Bronc was probably a 4 horsepower, maybe a 5, and the Super Bronc was maybe an 8 or a 10, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was a 10, and they were. It was really quite the awesome little outfit, considering that you bought it in the form of a kit for, I don't remember what it was, $400 or something like that, and you had to build it yourself, put it all together. But they were really a good, kind of dependable thing. The only problem was it was belt driven, and if you really gave it a good test, the belts didn't last terribly long.
No, that's true enough. Yeah, they were probably the Achilles heel of those. Now, the Held Company started out of Michigan in 1969. So this makes it the perfect back of the Popular Science or Popular Mechanics type of mini bike. I remember seeing those in the back of those types of magazines and going, oh man, look at that. Those guys are really having fun. And when you brought that Trail Bronc home for us, I thought that was about the biggest thing that ever happened. Prior to that, though, I had actually driven the trike version over at, it would be our dad's first cousin's place. He had a couple of Trail Broncs over there, and he had the Super Trike. That's what he had. And I got to drive that around. And I liked it. I mean, it was really comfortable to drive around, but there was something a little bit more exciting about getting on that two-wheeled version and just, twisting that grip and going for it. It was really it was an exciting thing.
Yeah, we had several trikes around when I was in Fordville, and they were fine and that, but like you said, there wasn't the challenge of trying to keep it on two wheels. It was always on three wheels, so it wasn't really tippy, and you could have some fun with it. You could actually throw some gravel with the tires if you cranked on the throttle on it. It was a lot of fun with those.
With the trikes, the trike didn't need your input that much to drive. It just needed you to kind of hang on, whereas the Trail Bronc and the Super Bronc, you had to actively participate. Now, the other one that we had was the Honda 90 Trail, or 90T, I think is what it was called. And I always thought to myself, that was one of the most fun mini bikes I had ever driven. I thought it was interesting. It kind of had that tranny and engine all in one package. And I think on that one, Dave, they had a high and a low and maybe a reverse.
Yeah, they had high and low. I don't remember if they had reverse, the ones we had. I wouldn't doubt that eventually they did have reverse because they were for trail riding and whatever, and maybe there was a need for that,
Now, for those of you out there who haven't ever seen a Honda 90 Trail or 90T, I don't know if they make them. I have my doubts. And if they do, they certainly wouldn't look probably like what they looked like before. I'd say nowadays, the closest thing you could compare it to is a real heavy-built moped. They had this single seat. I can't remember if there was a pill-on behind it. I doubt there was. I think there was just that single round seat, and then you had the neck. And then it was all one piece. And then the engine and tranny were in the back. And it was just to use a phrase, it was just a happy little machine. I remember having great times driving around Viking back in the early 80s and just having a blast with it.
Well, if you could find one now, which they're out there quite often you can find them, but there was an auction sale over in Minnesota, I think it was last year, where a guy had, 5 or 6 of them, And he even had the later ones that are like a 110 and that. And they brought huge money. I mean, probably about 3 times what they ever sold for. So they're still around, but now you probably wouldn't want to take it out in the mud because they're restored and collector things now.
Yeah, it's a problem. They get to be too precious to use, or they turn into parade machines. Dave, I suppose we should let you go. You got anything else for us this week?
No, I guess not. We're just going to get ready for spring around here and hope for some rain.
That sounds good to me. We'll talk to you next week. There he is, my brother Dave Nelson from Carrington, North Dakota. I'm Grant Nelson here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio, and this is the Rural Reflections Podcast.